When it comes to what you are spending on food every single month, the way that you grocery shop is only a small part of that equation.
Hi, if you don't know us, I'm Larry.
And I'm Hope.
And we're from Under the Median, where every week we bring you videos on practical frugality.
Have you found yourself recently walking out of the grocery store? You have fewer bags in your hand, but you have paid more for those groceries than you did the week before. If that's you, give us a me too in the comments section because we are right there with you. But one of the mistakes that people make when they consider how much they're spending on food is they start and stop with the act of wheeling that grocery cart through the grocery store. There are so many things that can factor into your total overall cost of food that don't happen in the grocery store, they happen in your home. And that's what this video is all about. Now, I have a lot to say on this topic, so heads up, this is going to be a two-part series. In this first video, I'll give you all of my how you prep and cook hacks. The next video in the series will cover ways that you can add incredible flavor to your meals without adding to the overall cost of those recipes or jacking up your grocery budget expenses. Part 2 will come your way on Monday, which leads me to remind you that if you're not subscribed to Under the Median, this is a great time to do it. Hit that subscribe button and make sure that you also click that bell notification button. What that bell notification button does is tell YouTube that you want them to let you know when we drop our next video.
One of the first and probably simplest ways to handle some of the costs that you have when you're cooking an item is if it's expensive, make it less often. Don't make it as often for your family.
But before you do this, there is something else that you should do, and that is determine the cost per serving or per recipe. I do this all the time. What it does is it gives me kind of a notebook of recipes that I know are low cost and my family loves to eat. And if the grocery budget gets a wee bit tight toward the end of the month, I can grab that list and say, look, I can make this and this and this. It's gonna lower the cost of my grocery budget. I have these items on hand in stock in the pantry, and then I'm not gonna have to run back to the grocery store. This method of determining exactly how much each recipe is costing you can be a gold mine, literally, in helping you to stretch your grocery budget.
Another thing you can do is consider some workarounds, especially if you have an expensive dish that you're making. Maybe you're putting a lot of expensive meats in there. Well, try using less meat.
Yeah.
Use it just to flavor the item instead of being the main dish.
Here's another example of a workaround. Use a cheaper cut. Now, granted, cheaper cuts of meat are going to have more fiber in them, maybe a little more fat, a little more gristle, and you're going to have to cook them maybe a little bit longer in order to break down those fibers. But a lot of times in recipes, you can substitute a cheaper cut and get essentially exactly the same dish. Now, if you're like us and you don't eat meat, you can also use that exact same sort of idea. Let's say that you are purchasing really expensive vegan meat substitutes. You can get away from that by making your own vegan sausages or making your own vegan meats. It's actually pretty easy to do and very inexpensive.
If you're enjoying these tips, consider hitting the like button. That helps the algorithms for YouTube and helps get the video out to more people.
And if you want all of our tips in one handy place, grab the Grocery Super Savings Bundle. It's a series of 5 ebooks. I walk you through how to shop at the grocery store in order to save money. Then we're going to add how to stock your pantry, how to cook, and even what to do if you look in your refrigerator and you think, oh my gosh, this is empty. I'll leave a link to the Grocery Super Savings Bundle. It will be in the description of this video.
Buying larger packages can also save you money. Generally, you're going to get a discount because of the amount that you're purchasing. But you may not have room in your storage at your home in order to put these items in your pantry or in your freezer, depending on what it is. But don't let that deter you. Go ahead and repackage it so it will fit into these smaller places.
You want to make sure when you're repackaging it that you package it in meal-sized portions. That makes it super easy to grab one package out of the freezer, thaw it, and then use that package for a recipe.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what happens is if it's in a larger package, you have to figure out what to do with the excess after you thaw it, or you wind up using more than you really needed to of a rather expensive ingredient in order to make that recipe. The other thing you might want to consider is batch cooking the entire larger package. Then you can simply shred it, dice it, cube it, do whatever you need to in order to put it in those smaller meal-sized packages and then put it in the freezer.
The next strategy is to use less of an expensive ingredient. Your grandma did this all the time. She divided things out and used those ingredients a little bit less in order to save some money.
She also added what she would call fillers. Any of you who have eaten Grandma's Sunday meatloaf know that she added filler in order to stretch the meat and make it serve a few more people. Ideas of some fillers that Grandma might have put in her meatloaf. She might have put oatmeal, bread, or rice, and I might be really thinking about adding lentils. Since we're plant-based, lentils immediately comes to mind in order to stretch meat. Here's another example, soup. It is so easy to add 2 or 3 more cups of water or stock to your soup. Then you are going to add a little bit of a starch because that starch will expand in that soup broth and make it go farther. So you're going to add some rice or some millet or some barley or even some small pasta to that soup pot. It makes it heartier, it will fill up hungry tummies a little bit faster, and it will stretch to feed more people.
When you're using ground beef in chili, you can save a little bit of money on the beef by adding some lentils instead. And lentils have quite a bit of the same feel to them as beef does. The other thing you can do is use red lentils. That will make your soup a little bit thicker.
The next tip you might want to try is to simply leave out that expensive ingredient completely. Ask yourself, is there something else that I can use instead of the meat? Now, that's easy for me to say because I don't cook with meat, but there are an amazing variety of ways that you can cook without meat. You're simply leaving that expensive ingredient and cooking with it less often, and you're leaving it completely out of some recipes. Here's another example. When you leave that expensive item out, you might want to substitute something that is less expensive. For example, nuts are rather pricey. Instead of using nuts, you may be able to use, say, a combination of oats and maybe something else that will give that same texture that the nuts would have without adding the expensive nuts into the recipe.
Consider planned reuse, and Hope has an example.
Let's just say that you roast an entire chicken. You're going to take some of that meat off the bone and serve it for night number 1. Then you're going to take the bones and you are going to cook those bones down in a crock pot overnight, and you're going to make yourself chicken broth. Comb through all of the rest of the bones the next morning, take off any residual meat, put that back in the crock pot with the broth. Then you're going to add some vegetables and you're going to make yourself some chicken soup. And if you add some noodles, it becomes immediately chicken noodle soup. Another way that you might reuse it is, remember, you took some of that meat off and you reserved it for night number 1. So you have some chicken meat that is now available. You can dice it, you can shred it, you can use it in casseroles. You can make a little bit of a gravy with it by adding some flour and some milk, and you're going to create a topping for hot stuffed baked potatoes. When you begin to think in terms of this, all of a sudden, you won't see just a roasted chicken in front of you. You will see 5 meals from one roasted chicken sitting in front of you.
Hope's going to show you in the next video, that's part 2 of this one, that adding flavors can make your recipes so much more appealing to your friends and family,
without adding any additional cost to those recipes. So make sure, once again, that you're watching for part 2 of this video series. And speaking of flavor, you might want to consider adding an alternative version of a more expensive ingredient that adds more robust flavor. Here is a fantastic example. Cheese. Cheese is rather pricey. When you substitute a very robust, very deep flavored cheese, instead of a mozzarella, let's say that you're going to put a Parmesan on, you will be able to use less of that Parmesan cheese and just sort of anoint a little bit the top of a casserole, and you're going to get an intense amount of flavor.
You can stretch any recipe by adding grains to it. So make sure you have plenty of grains on hand, already fixed, that you can add in order to save some money.
Rice, quinoa, pasta, those are all examples of what you might be able to reinvent into recipes for your family by adding just a few simple ingredients. Now, I thought this was easiest to show you exactly what that looks like in our family. So I headed on over to my Facebook account and pulled off photos that illustrate exactly what I'm talking about. I showed you photos of what I did with rice in order to make an entire meal out of 4 cups of cooked rice by just adding a few simple ingredients. I have some photos with some quinoa that show exactly the same sort of thing. And then pasta, of course, you have the spaghetti, and then you also have some of the rotini and other pastas that you can use the pasta or the rice or the grain as the base ingredient and then add just a few additional items, and that will feed a lot of people for very little money. Now, speaking of Facebook, if you don't follow me on Facebook or Instagram, I do share a lot of photos on those two other social media sites that show you exactly what I feed our family, and I give tips all the time over there, additional tips that aren't here on YouTube. So if you don't follow us on Instagram or Facebook, I'm going to make sure that I leave links to those social media channels. They'll be in the description of this video.
And by the way, I just wanted to point out that on this video, Hope is doing most of the talking, and that's because Hope is the expert in this field. This is way out of my league. I don't really do any cooking around the house, which my family is grateful for.
He does really good eating, though. So he is here for my emotional support, guys. So yeah, I'm doing a little bit more of the talking with this video, but he's going to chime in when he has his 2 cents worth to say, all right?
Everybody has to be an expert in something. Do a regular perishable food inventory. This will do a couple things. This will help you know what you have, and this will keep from anything that you have that's perishable from going bad too soon, because you're going to do a prioritized listing where you're going to put the foods that need to be used up the first at the top of that list.
Wait, do you want to say my word? Usually I say it. You can do it. Go ahead.
Prioritize.
There we go. The list should be prioritized. Now, what he means by that, guys, is that the items with the shortest shelf life go at the top of that perishable food list, and the items which will last just a little bit longer before you use them up, they'll go toward the bottom of the list. What that allows you to do is instantly see exactly what you have on hand, and you can menu plan using those items at the top of the list so they get used up and they don't go brown or slimy or some other unappealing color, and you wind up having to throw them out, because we all know when you throw food out in the garbage, you are wasting your food and your money.
Another thing you can do is use more herbs and spices.
I'm a huge fan of herbs and spices, and I'm going to show more of these in part 2 of this video. I'm literally going to open my cupboards and show you guys what it is that I am using to add a lot of flavor to our family's dishes without adding a lot more price tag to those dishes. But I did want to mention it here. One of the things that it's easy to do is grow a few herbs. We've got a little herb garden out to the side of the house. And they're super easy to grow, and they're not very picky, because for me, like, stuff I forget to water. There's all kinds of bad things that I do to plants, and herbs still do okay in my yard. Proof that they are not very high maintenance when it comes to plants. But you can also get big bunches of herbs. We saw them this summer at the farmer's market. For $2 for a huge bunch of, say, basil or dill or mint. You can bring those home and you can dehydrate them. Yes, you can use an actual dehydrator. I have 2 of them, and I use them quite a bit.
Yes,
you can also use your oven. You can also air dry to dehydrate items. And you can also dehydrate things using your microwave. So there's a lot of methods for dehydrating herbs and spices. And in my opinion, I don't know if you agree with me or not. You can tell me if you do in the comment section. I think that herbs and spices that have been dehydrated at home, I think they hold their color a little bit better than the commercial versions, and I think that they have more flavor than the commercial versions. So that's something you can do that's super easy, super inexpensive to add some flavor to your food.
Consider buying food in a flat form. In other words, it's kind of a bulk way of buying fruits and vegetables. These can later be frozen or processed in some way that they can be preserved for later use. And this way, what you want to do is buy them when they're on sale. Get a special price on those. So when the price goes up, you're getting into your freezer and you're pulling those out at the price that you paid a lot less for.
You get flats are generally for berries, bushels. You can buy a bushel, half bushel of something. Contact local farmers. You see farmers at the farmers market, especially if you frequent their stand and you say, "Hey, I really need a half bushel of those green beans. Can we make a deal?" And a lot of times they'll lower the price per pound for you, and they'll bring that half bushel of fresh picked green beans to their stall the following week, and you can just pick it up directly from their stall. So think about that. Get to know your local farmers.
You can apply the DIY principle, the do-it-yourself principle, to some of this cooking to save you quite a bit of money. We're going to give some examples of this. One of them would be vanilla extract. You can make that yourself and save a boatload on it, or use it more sparingly if you don't know how to do it.
I have a step-by-step tutorial on how to make your own vanilla. It's on the website, and I'm going to make sure that blog post, guys, is in the description of the video. Here's another blog post I'm going to make sure that I put in the video description. This is a DIY thing that was so incredibly easy to do, and that is to make your own vegetable stock. I just save all the trimmings from my vegetables as I'm cooking throughout the week, and herbs. I save those thick stems in the middle of herbs. I stick those in my bag and put them in the freezer, and it says vegetable stock, so the kids don't get in it and try to eat it. Because if it's in the freezer, they think it's edible. Make it clear to your family, don't try to eat this stuff.
Yeah.
And once that freezer bag is full, gallon freezer bag, all you have to do is put it into your pressure cooker, cover it with water, put it to pressurize for 14 minutes, let it naturally release, and you have homemade vegetable stock. Super, super duper easy. And once again, those two DIY ideas, the vanilla and the vegetable broth, I will make sure that there's a link to both those posts. I'll put them in the video description for you.
This next strategy has been mentioned just a little bit in this video, but that is to creatively substitute more expensive items for less expensive. And that might be something like nuts. Instead of using peanuts or walnuts, to use some oatmeal or maybe even some fruit instead as a good filler or flavor to your dish.
What we're really trying to do here, guys, is to whet your appetite. Yes, that is a food pun that is as good as it gets here on this channel. But we want to remind you that part 2 of this video series is coming up on Monday, so make sure that you are looking for that. But while you're waiting, we mentioned earlier in the video, of course, the way that you grocery shop does have some impact on your total grocery bill.
Absolutely.
We have a lot of different tips, hacks, and strategies for shopping at the grocery store. You want to watch one of those videos where we talked about it? It's right over there.